Thanks for checking out another episode of the Forbes Books Podcast. And I love chatting with creative entrepreneurs. They can't just stop with one idea. I mean, Steve Jobs was the ultimate example of that. He didn't just stop with the Mac. He went on with the iPod and the iPhone and the iPod, and it just never ended at Apple. And joining me today is a gentleman who sort of has that same sort of energy and creative spirit that doesn't let him just stop at one thing. Some restaurateurs are happy with just building one amazing restaurant. But my guest today built two. The Meatball Shop and Seymour's have become iconic restaurants with multiple locations all around New York City. But now he is taking a break from restaurants to create a direct-to-consumer oatmeal brand called Kreatures of Habit. His name is Michael Chernow. Michael, how you doing today?
I am so well.
That's fantastic. I love to hear it. And so I'm going to ask a personal question out of the box here. So my niece is just about wrapping up culinary school at Johnson & Wales, and you have a pretty good experience in the restaurant business. Talk to me about the future of restaurant and hospitality. To me, it seems scary. She's scared about it. What do you think the future looks like in that space now in this post-pandemic world?
It's a very interesting question. I have a pretty strong opinion on it. Human beings crave experience. For years, as a restaurateur, people would ask me what I did for a living. And after a little while, I got sick and tired of saying I open restaurants or I'm in the restaurant business. What I ended up saying for the last probably 6-7 years was I'm a memory maker. And the reason why I say that is because I believe in my heart of hearts that people crave beautiful experiences. And I believe that will never change. We go out of our way to enjoy being around others. And when most people, talk about depression and mental health and stuff like that, they tend to isolate and be alone. And that's a really not a fun place for people to be. And so when you think of the opposite side of that, it's around others, doing great things and enjoying yourself. And that is what the majority of the people in the world want to do, whether they're in a bad place or not. So I personally believe that the restaurant business will be back and running and thriving again for sure. I think we're in a little bit of a reset right now. The world has been hit with some catastrophic stuff, and it's been a really, really challenging time for every industry. Every single human being on the planet's been impacted by this unbelievably terrible pandemic. So, like all things, we will begin again. And I believe that the restaurant industry will be just fine. It's definitely gonna see a few changes. I think anybody that's listening that's in the restaurant business or is looking to be in the restaurant business, if you're looking to create a new concept, or if you have a restaurant that already exists that's made it through the battle, I would just deeply consider looking into a robust delivery platform, because delivery is going to be a new part of the way people think about ordering food from restaurants and not cooking at home. If you are not thinking about that, you should certainly be thinking about that and build out your menu, or at least a section of your menu that delivers well, food that delivers well. You wouldn't want to send raw fish for delivery. Just, people do that all the time, but it's just not something that I would consider going forward in terms of long-term sustainability. I really do believe that building out menu items that deliver well, because people are certainly going to be thinking about that, especially who knows what's going to happen this winter. I'm crossing my fingers that we don't get hit with another wave, but anybody that's in the game or looking to be in the game, really do consider a mobile menu that will travel well. And make sure that you build out systems internally that can manage that and handle that and promote that.
And how about the economics of the restaurant business? Michael, you know as well as I do, you walk down the street, windows of stores and restaurants are papered with help wanted signs. Restaurants are going to eventually have to start paying, if they haven't already, start paying their employees more money, which means that money has to come from somewhere. So the experience, the memory making that you talk about is going to be more expensive. How do you see the restaurant industry handling that dance down the road? Because it's going to be one of those things where it's incrementally, right? You're not all of a sudden charging one day it's a hamburger's $10 and the next day it's $20. So how do you think restaurants will handle that?
Well, it's a good question. I think, like everything, things get more expensive. It's very rare that things get cheaper. However, the restaurant industry for many years, specifically in major markets, tier one markets like New York, Los Angeles, South Florida, Chicago, now Austin, even Dallas, places like that, the livelihood of these restaurants were really in the hands of the landlords, because the landlords know if they have a main on main property, they're able to charge, exorbitant amounts of capital for rents. And now the roles have reversed a little bit. And I'm not saying it like, oh, we got you. You know what I mean? I'm saying that it was way out of balance. It was way out of balance. Restaurants could not make a bottom line paying these unbelievable rents. And so now, with the massive vacation of a lot of restaurants in New York specifically, landlords have had to lighten up a little bit and renegotiate leases. And so what's happened with the pandemic is a few things, right? Landlords have really come to the table in many cases and said, okay, we want to work with you. Let's get creative. A lot of landlords have opened up to being partners in the business, taking a percentage of sales as opposed to a flat base rent, which has been great for restaurants because if they sell $1, they give 10 cents. If they sell $10, they give $1. And so it's really given restaurants a little bit of freedom to feel like, if they're not making money, they're not paying rent. And so landlords have really come to the table, which has been awesome to see. So rents are lightening up for sure in the city. Deals that were happening in 2018 and 2019 are no longer happening, those kind of deals. And the other component is restaurateurs have also learned how to operate their businesses more efficiently because, as we all know, a lot of people didn't want to come to work because of the pandemic, which is totally understandable. And a lot of restaurants couldn't afford to keep people on the payroll. So they had to really, really trim down their staff and run with a really lean crew. And so they've learned how to operate their businesses more efficiently, which I think is ultimately going to help with the bottom line. Minimum wage has gone up, in the last 10 years, enormously in New York and specifically out on the West Coast, California, Las Vegas, stuff like that. And so it's just something that we're going to have to deal with. And the customers or the guests of restaurants are going to have to understand that prices are going to go up. And that's just, unfortunately, what it is. Like if you want to move to New York City, you're going to have to pay New York City rents. And if you want to eat in some of the great restaurants in New York, well, it's going to be a little bit more expensive. And that's just the way it is. And it's, it's retraining the guest, which is hard to do. It's hard to do, but it's inevitable.
I want to talk about your restaurant career. So did you ever go to culinary school or train for it? Or was it just pretty much all School of Hard Knocks, learn as you go kind of stuff?
I did go to culinary school. I worked in restaurants from like 12, 13 up until the Meatball Shop when I was 28. And when I was 25, I took my boss aside. I had come to the conclusion that this was going to be the industry that I was going to spend my career in. I was in love with everything about the restaurant industry, the food, the beverage, the hospitality, everything, the people. The people really drove me. And so I said to Frank, hey man, I really want to do my own thing. Can you give me some advice? And he looked at me and he said, Mikey, I love you to death, man. I just don't know if you have it in you. And
now, why did he say that?
Well, if you ask him that now, his answer is because he wanted to motivate me.
Oh, okay.
But back then I didn't take it like that. I
took
it pretty personally. However, he said, but if you really want to take it seriously, if I was you, I would go to culinary school. So I immediately enrolled in the French Culinary Institute about 3 months later. Went to culinary school, got a chef's culinary degree, and while I was there, they had introduced a restaurant management program that was taught by Cornell professors and a bunch of restaurateurs in New York, predominantly Union Square hospitality guys.
Oh yeah, sure.
And so I took that as well.
Talk to me about the comparison of living it for, I guess, almost 10 years by that point to then going to school for it. What do you think was the main differences on sort of how your brain processed that information? Obviously, when you're doing practical stuff in the real world, it's sort of, I guess it's a little more of animalistic sort of, sort of like your body just takes over. But how did you transition into sort of like the academic side of it? What was that like for you?
I loved it. I mean, look, it's the difference is really like, getting thrown into a cage with ravenous wolves, and slowly starting out with the puppies, right? And so culinary school is definitely starting out with the puppies, and you get to understand what it's like to properly cut things with all the terminology, all the tools you really understand how to use thoroughly. The French Culinary Institute was really, it was obviously French influenced, and so it was very meticulous. They really taught fine dining French technique. So I was given, a really great background on the origin of fine dining there and how to really manage in an upscale restaurant, and the coolest thing about that experience for me was I apply it to like everything in my life, they taught me that, a clean station means you're ready to work. And if you don't have a clean station, you're really not ready to work. And that I can apply to everything, right? Like if I'm organized and I've got my priorities straight, I can then go on and take on the next task. If I don't, then I better finish what I'm doing before I try to do something else. And so they really focused on one thing at a time, get it done, finish it into completion, and then start doing the next thing.
Did you feel you were at an advantage over the other, your words, puppies, because you had so much experience? Because, obviously a lot of that fine dining stuff you learned there, but did you feel like you had a bit of a leg up on your classmates?
I did. And all the chefs knew it. I'd been working in the restaurant for years and years at that point. And so I was very familiar with most everything that they were teaching. But it was very, very tough. I got to say that it was a very tough program. Not everybody graduates. At the end, you have to do this final where you have to cook a full coursed out meal to perfection. You're not able to have any notes with you. It's very, very, typically there's a team of people cooking this kind of food.
Right.
You were required, and you have 8 hours to do it. You're required to pull off this meal by yourself.
Wow.
From scratch.
Well, take me back. Michael, I'd love to dig into this. Take me back to that day. Talk to me about what kind of preparation did you have to do before that day? Was it something like did you have to create the menu yourself before that day, or is it something that's thrown on you on test day?
No, they basically give us, if I remember correctly, there were 5 dishes in each course that we had to know.
Okay.
And we worked on it for, I think, 3 or 4 weeks in class. And you had to take as many notes as you can. And then on test day, they choose one of those dishes from each course and tell you to cook it. So you have to know 15 or 20 dishes, and then they're only going to ask you to cook 4.
And memorize, right? You have to know literally every ingredient.
Yeah. And so I cooked this many, many times at home with my wife. We ate a lot of heavy French food at home. I was, look, I'm also like, school was never my thing. I wasn't a terrible student, but I certainly wasn't like a straight A student. I really gravitated towards the EQ over IQ my whole life. I'm much more of an emotionally intelligent guy than I am an intellectually intelligent guy. And I didn't know that until someone had told me that. But so studying was just not something that I loved to do. But I was passionate about food, and I was passionate about learning about this style of cooking. And so I really took it very seriously, and I crushed the exam, which was great. But it was stressful. And then you had to do a final project on top of the exam.
Oh, geez.
Which was it was essentially like a thesis. So I did my thesis on Catalan style cuisine.
Oh, sure.
And
Hola.
It's some of my favorite food in the world. And so I dove deep on that. And then you have to present your final project with completed dishes for the whole class.
Wow. So you graduate from this prestigious French culinary school. You've got years of restaurant experience, and then you decide to branch out on your own, and you get into the meatball business with the Meatball Shop. And now when you talk to someone about a meatball restaurant, they're like, oh yeah, there's this one and that one, but you guys were the first. So tell me what the inspiration was for that very first Meatball Shop.
There's something that I will say about I think the DNA of an entrepreneur. And that's why not everybody is an entrepreneur, and those, not everybody's meant to be an entrepreneur. I do believe that entrepreneurs have an ability to run towards the fear. And it's not that they're not scared, but there's like some weird gene, thing where the level of stress and anxiety that an entrepreneur can deal with on a regular basis is just more than the average Joe or the average Jill. And so I knew that this is what I was going to do. I didn't know it was going to be the Meatball Shop, but I knew I was going to go out and try to create my own business. And I ran at it as fast as I could. It's crazy that it happened to me meatballs. I mean, I worked at an Italian restaurant for 8 years before I opened up the Meatball Shop. And my family meal there, or the meal that I would order late night, was a bowl of this. There was a dish on the menu called the rigatoni ragu. It's one of the best dishes, in my opinion, still to the day in New York. It's very simple. It's rigatoni pasta with meatballs and sausage, Parmesan cheese. The red sauce is one of the best red sauces I've ever had in my life. And anybody who's had that dish will attest to that. It's just absolutely delicious. And so I would just order the rigatoni ragu, sans the rigatoni. And that was my meal 2 to 3 nights a week there at Frank. And Daniel and I were banging our heads against the wall trying to figure out what we were going to do as a concept. We knew we wanted to do something simple. We were coming out of the pit of a recession, so we knew it had to be inexpensive. And we really wanted to go for a volume play as opposed to like a super fine dining experience. We really wanted to have like a fun place that was not expensive. We just couldn't figure out what it was going to be. And then I remember very clearly one night, probably 1 o'clock in the morning, Dan and we were walking north on 2nd Avenue, and we got to 7th Street. And on 2nd Avenue, between 6th and 7th Street, there was a little spot called Palm Frites. It was this little tiny hole in the wall French fry spot. And 1 o'clock in the morning on like a Wednesday, slam packed, just line out the door. And I said, man, like that, we got to figure out something like that. Just simple, delicious, sop up the booze. And I knew that I wanted to open the restaurant in the Lower East Side. And so I looked at Dan and I kind of said, what do you think about meatballs? Like no one's ever really done meatballs. And everybody always questions my bowl of meatballs late night at Frank. And he was like, meatballs. Yes, that's a great idea. And so we dug into the meatball thing. And the cool thing about meatballs is that it's ground meat, right? So you don't have to use the most expensive cuts, but you can still get super high quality beef or chicken or lamb or whatever protein you're using. You can get the highest quality, the protein from the best farms in the country, because you were not trying to use the cuts that everybody is after, like the super premium cuts, the steaks and whatnot. So we started cooking these meatball dinners at my apartment in Brooklyn every Sunday for all of our friends. And we would do these huge meatball dinners, cook all sorts of different meatballs and sides, and everybody loved it. Like everybody loved it. It was just like they couldn't wait to come on Sundays to my place in Brooklyn. And we started building the menu, and Daniel had like 20 grand. I had, 20 grand. We put our life savings into this thing. We asked all of our friends and family to help us, with some cash, and we raised some money there. And then I put the business plan for the Meatball Shop in front of like 20 regulars at the restaurant that I worked at. And 10 to 12 of those guys wrote me a check.
Wow.
And so we raised 400 grand, or just under 400 grand. I knew where I wanted the restaurant to be. I was very specific. I knew it had to be east of Allen, west of Essex, north of Delancey, and south of Houston.
So you didn't give it any thought whatsoever where it was going to be?
No, yeah, exactly. I just, but I was just so specific about the location, because the Lower East Side, this is 2008, 2009. We were in a recession. People were like really drinking hard. And that neighborhood was on fire. It was just on fire. And there were, like the pizzeria on the corner of Houston and on the corner of Stanton and Orchard was always packed late night. And the falafel spot on Houston and Orchard was just packed every night, just like slammed. Everybody was just lining up. And I said, man, we can create better food than this for around the same price. We need to be down here and we need to do this, and we're going to be open super late. And so we waited and waited and waited until finally we found a spot on Stanton between Allen and Orchard. It was like just a block. It was just a half a block off of the main drag over there. But I just felt like it was the right spot, and we took it. And Daniel and I, we got the keys the Wednesday before Thanksgiving in 2009, and Daniel and I put paper up on the windows. And we went to work. We didn't hire contractors. He and I ripped up the restaurant that was in there, and we built the Meatball Shop with our own hands together. And we were told to hire a publicist. We had no idea what a publicist was. But this guy, Phil Baltz, walked in one day and saw me on my hands and knees sanding the bar, and Daniel, doing the tiles, and said, "What's going on in here?" And he said, "You guys are onto something." We told him our story, best friends. We worked in restaurants together forever. And, we're like brothers, and this is our idea. And he said, "You guys, I'm going to take you guys on." And he gave us a deal that we didn't think that we were going to be able to work with him, but he really worked with us. And because of them and, the authenticity of this brand, the day we opened the doors of the Meatball Shop, there were like 250 people online to eat. Yeah.
When did you know, I mean, obviously that you opened up with a bang, and if memory serves correct, I remember you guys were firing all cylinders from the beginning. But when along the process, before opening, did you think, or did you probably know that this is going to work? Was there like a moment along the way before the doors opened that you're like, yeah, this is a thing, this is going to work?
I am the most optimistic, positive guy you've ever met. I am constantly on offense. I really am just like an overly optimistic guy. And my partner Daniel in the Meatball Shop is the exact opposite.
That's good. You need the yin and yang, yeah.
Yeah. He thinks, I remember very clearly, it was opening night. We were standing at the back of the restaurant. Our publicist was there with us, and she said, "You are not to go outside, and you are not to take the paper off those windows until we are ready to open for business." So we did not know what was going on outside of that restaurant. But I said to Daniel, I knew it. I said, "Dude, we are going to crush. There are going to be tons of people out there, I'm telling you." And he said, "Dude, there's no chance." He said, "No chance." And sure enough, 5:30, pulled the windows off, pulled the paper off the windows, and man, there was a mob outside. A mob. Wow. And that mob did not change for years. I mean, people were waiting hours. I'm talking about 3-4 hours to eat at the Meatball Shop. I knew that we had really done something special when, we had got a lot of press out the gate, like a lot, like Today's Show, Good Morning America. But really, when I knew that we had done something really special, we got asked to cook meatballs on Jay Leno. And we were sitting in the green room, and Jay Leno walks in, and he's like the nicest guy ever. And he sits down with us for 20 minutes, and he was just talking about us, about how awesome he thinks the Meatball Shop is, and he's had the food, and his friends talk about it. And I was just like pinching myself, like, is this real? Like, is this really happening? I'm sitting with this guy that I've watched since I'm a kid. Like, did I ever think, that I would ever get close to being on the Jay Leno show? And then that followed with Jimmy Fallon and Chelsea Handler. And then we had a TV show. I mean, so that story is truly the most epic for me in my life. It was just such a dream come true, and also really, really tough, really tough. Like, Daniel and I didn't go to business school. We didn't know, how to scale or operate or run a business. Really, we were winging it, and we had to learn fast, But I will say this, we paid back our initial investors in 6 months. We raised a bunch more money. We opened up 4 more restaurants in the next 2.5 years. And the Meatball Shop is now an iconic New York City establishment. Whenever I'm in a setting and people don't know that I was part of the founding team of the Meatball Shop, I'll say, "Hey, I opened the Meatball Shop," or if they ask, and 9 out of 10 times it's either that person's favorite restaurant or it's the first place they take their friends and family to when they come to New York City.
That's awesome. So fast forwarding a bit, You go off and design another concept, Seymour's, which becomes another big hit restaurant with multiple locations. You write a bunch of cookbooks, you become a regular on the Food Network, and now you're changing things up a bit with not a restaurant, but a direct-to-consumer brand called Kreatures of Habit. So what led you to this venture?
So I'll just give you a little backstory, to talk about Kreatures. So when I was 23 years old, I had to make a very big decision in my life. And when I was 23 years old, I decided to stop drinking and I got sober. I did that for a number of reasons. I worked in the night and I was exposed to a lot of the bad news as a kid growing up in the city in regards to alcohol and drugs, and working in restaurants and nightclubs. It's part of the lifestyle. And enough people at that point in my life had tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, Mike, you're playing with fire. You're a great guy. You have a lot to offer, but you're walking down a dark path. And I just want to let you know that we care about you and you should really think about bringing, this to an end." And it started to really impact my life in a negative way. And so my boss at the time, Frank from Frank Restaurant, finally said to me, "Look, kid, you're great, but I can't keep you here anymore if you're going to continue to drink and do what you're doing here. I mean, I know that I give you guys a lot of freedom, but you're blowing it. And so, you got to get sober. I can't watch you do this to yourself on my dime." And I was mortified because that job was everything to me. I love that restaurant and I love that job. And I begged him to not fire me. And he said, "I'll give you an ultimatum, I want to see you succeed, but that's not happening. And so the only way you can keep your job here is if you clean up your act and get sober and show up to the restaurant at 8 o'clock in the morning and work with the porters and clean the restaurant for a month with them. I'll obviously pay you to do it, but I'm not going to give you a job on the floor again because I'm watching you deteriorate." And so it really hit me in the heart, and I got sober. And I linked up with a couple of guys who I looked up to as older brothers, and they were sober, and I always admired them for that. And they took me under their wing, and they dragged me over to a Muay Thai kickboxing gym, and they said, "This is where you're going to start your new life, in this gym." And they taught me how to live a well life. And they said, "This is what you're going to do. You're going to wake up in the morning. You're going to have a big bowl of oatmeal. You are either going to go for a run or go to an AA meeting. Then you're going to get done with that. You're going to come straight to the gym and you're going to train hard. And you're going to have chicken and broccoli for lunch. And you're going to go to work and you're going to have chicken and broccoli for dinner. And that's what you're going to do. And we're going to make sure that you stick to that plan." And those guys really held my hand and taught me how to live a life of wellness. Once I latched in on that, every single thing in my life changed. Everything became better, everything, when I got into fitness and started to take care of myself nutritionally, because I didn't even know what I ate before I got sober. I really don't. And so this business, Creatures of Habit, was built as a byproduct of my journey. And so it was initially going to start with a restaurant. And I was going to use the restaurant as an incubator for a line of consumer packaged goods that I would then scale. I didn't want to scale another restaurant group, but I knew that restaurant was a great way to build community. Anyway, the pandemic hit and I had a bunch of investors lined up. I had a lease and I didn't sign the lease, thank God. March 2020, second week of March 2020, I knew I was going to have to pull the ripcord on this thing. And I spoke to the landlords, and I said, this isn't going to work. And I called up the investors and I said, "Guys, I'm not going to invest my money into a restaurant right now, so I certainly wouldn't expect you to invest yours." And I had to take a beat. I hired an executive coach and I really did some deep diving and realized that I did not need to be in the restaurant business. I love creating brands that resonate with people. I love making people happy. I love being of service. I love helping people. I really do. It really drives me. And I have a story that is got some adversity in it, and I've seen some things and I've gone through some things. And that in itself is a real ticket for relatability for other people. And so Creatures of Habit is not a sobriety story. Creatures of Habit is a story of change for the better. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to put a line through the restaurant and I am going to go back to where it all began. I'm going to create this oatmeal that I started eating 17 years ago and have been eating every single day for the last 17 years as my morning win, as the first nutritional thing I put into my body to really give me an opportunity to feel like I've won and I have a better chance of winning for the rest of the day. And over the years, my oatmeal has grown to this like crazy thing. It was gluten-free oats and plant-based protein powder and pumpkin seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds, pink Himalayan salt. I would put some shaved almonds in it. And then on the side of the oatmeal, I had my probiotic, I had my vitamin D3, I had my omega-3 fatty acids, and I had my digestive enzymes. And that was sort of my morning package. And so I connected with a couple of guys and said, hey, I really want to figure out a way to put all this stuff together in a pouch. And I want to be able to make it in 3 minutes or less. I really wanted to innovate on the instant oatmeal world because it's a huge market. Everybody understands and loves oatmeal for the most part. And no one's really taken a stab at making it better.
So it sounds like you didn't want to make another Quaker Oats here. This was a little different.
This is different. This is a functional, incredibly healthy, absolutely delicious meal to kick your day off with. That is going to get you 30 grams of plant-based protein, 7,000 IUs of vitamin D3, 300 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids, an awesome probiotic, and digestive enzymes to help with your microbiome. This is like a wellness insurance that you've always wanted but didn't want to spend the money or time to create. Because look, when I have this oatmeal in the morning, it's a lot of stuff, man. It's my oats, it's my protein, it's my omega-3 supplements, it's my vitamin D3 supplements. I said I want to be able to package all of this in one pouch that is super easy to make. And the guys that I was trying to create this with kind of laughed me out of their office when I told them what I wanted to do. And I said, look, I believe in this thing more than anything else in my life. And I know it's funny, it's instant oatmeal, but this changed my life. This gave me purpose, and this gave me a reason to believe that I can be better.
Michael, talk to me about cracking into this $3 billion oats category, which is dominated by the big boys. I mean, PepsiCo owns Quaker Oats. So how does Kreatures fit into the landscape of the oats industry? Like, how do you get a piece of that pie?
Everybody's got to start somewhere, right? If I can scratch the surface of the oatmeal consumer and say, hey, I don't know if you're supplementing with these essential vitamins, right? Like vitamin D3 is really a distinguishing element for Creatures of Habit. The high quantity of super high quality protein. We are not getting as much protein as we need today. High protein is incredible for weight management, all sorts of things, bone density, muscle development. High protein is something that we should all be thinking about. But the vitamin D3 is something that our body needs for immunity, for so many things, specifically immunity, though our immune systems thrive with levels of vitamin D3, brain functionality. But we only get D3, our body makes D3 from the sun when we are exposed to the sun on a consistent daily basis. We as human beings were designed to be outside working. And over the last 75 to 100 years, we have gone from outside workers to inside workers. And we are sedentary beings for the most part. Most people spend their day sitting down. And so we are all D3 deficient. 90% of the global population is D3 deficient. And so I said, you know what, this is such a vital piece of the puzzle for me to include in this product. If you eat the protagonist, over 6 to 8 weeks, you will go from D3 deficient to D3 sufficient, which is huge, just overall well-being. And so that, I think, is where this product wins. The high protein content and the vitamin D3, and the omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3s we need omega-3 fatty acids, and we do not produce them. We get them from outside resources. So I went straight to the original source of omega-3s, which is microalgae. Now, it doesn't taste like, there's no taste of microalgae, obviously, in the food, but it's essential for us to have these things. And so I wanted to create a delicious meal that's made, you can make the protagonist It's called the Protagonist, the oatmeal. You can make it by just adding hot water in under 3 minutes. You can make it in a microwave, of course, like traditional Quaker oats. You can make it overnight, which is my favorite, where you just add, half a cup or 3/4 of a cup of any kind of milk of choice or just water, and mix it well, throw it in the fridge, and it's absolutely delicious in the morning. Or you can make a smoothie out of it by just adding ice and liquid. So, I spent a year working on the formula. I went through 60 different iterations, actually a little over 60 different iterations until I felt like it was ready to go to market. And now it's available on creaturesofhabit.com, and it's creatures with a K. I'm just trying to own this oatmeal thing, because if you can own the morning, you can own your day. And if you own your day, I promise you can own your life. And that's just the truth.
His name is Michael Chernow. He is the founder of the Meatball Shop, Seymour's, and his latest venture, Creatures of Habit. Find out more information about Creatures at creaturesofhabit.com. That's creatures with a K. Michael, it's been a pleasure catching up with you. I wish you the best of luck and can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much, man. It was great catching up.
And that's it for this edition of the Forbes Books Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you take a second to subscribe so you automatically get new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I would love if you left us a review so more amazing entrepreneurs like yourself can discover the show. And please don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.
This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio. Find out more at ForbesBooksRadio.com.